Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Marshall Rayner's fingers danced across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The familiar click-clack rhythm matched his steady heartbeat as he put the finishing touches on his quarterly report. His home office, a testament to his methodical nature, contained nothing that didn't serve a purpose: a sleek desk, ergonomic chair, and a single potted plant that Aubrey had insisted would add life to the space. That he glanced at the clock on his monitor. 3:52 p.m., 2 hours ahead of deadline. As always, Marshall rolled his shoulders back, easing the tension that had built up during the 3-hour stretch of uninterrupted work. The muffled sound of Aubrey's voice drifted through the wall. She was in the guest bedroom, which she had claimed as her Zoom room when they both started working from home. Marshall stood up, stretching his legs. He needed water, and the kitchen was just past the guest bedroom. As he approached, Aubrey's voice grew clearer. The door was cracked open, and he could see her profile illuminated by the blue light of her laptop screen. "I'm worried about Marshall," Aubrey was saying, her voice hushed. Marshall paused. She hadn't mentioned any concerns to him. "What's he done now?" The response came from Delaney, Aubrey's best friend and coworker. The disdain in her voice was unmistakable. "God, he's asking me if we should have kids," Aubrey whispered, failing to mute her microphone. "How do you politely reject a man who pays your rent and everything?" Marshall's hand froze on the doorframe. His body went still, even as his mind raced to process what he'd just heard. That Delaney's laughter crackled through the speakers. "Just make the kid, then divorce later. Enjoy the alimony." More laughter. Aubrey's shoulders shook with it. "You're terrible," Aubrey said, but she was smiling. "I'm practical," Delaney countered. "The guy's got, 3 investment properties now? And that tech job? Girl, you hit the boring jackpot." I know. But kids? With Marshall? Can you imagine how rigid the schedule would be?" "Sorry, baby. Daddy can't change your diaper right now. It's not on the Excel spreadsheet." They dissolved into giggles again. Marshall backed away from the door. His face remained expressionless, but something inside him shifted, a tectonic plate moving beneath still waters. The quiet pulse in his temples was the only outward sign that anything had changed. That he returned to his office, his movements automatic. He saved his work, closed his laptop, and shut it with a gentle click. Then he opened his desk drawer and removed a small notebook, one Aubrey had never seen. Inside were account numbers, passwords, and a series of notations that only he understood. He tucked it into his pocket, grabbed his keys, wallet, and phone, and walked to the front door. That he didn't slam it. He closed it quietly, with the same care he always took. The betrayal wasn't that she didn't want children. That was her choice. The betrayal was the mockery, the calculation, the cold assessment of what he was worth to her. Yes, he started his car, a practical mid-size sedan he'd bought with cash. Marshall's mind was already several steps ahead. Portland's afternoon traffic crawled around him as Marshall drove with no particular destination. The gray clouds hung low, mirroring his thoughts. Rain tapped gently on the roof of his car, creating a soothing rhythm that helped him think that he wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, he felt strangely clear-headed, as if he'd just woken from a long sleep. Had there been signs? Of course there had. Aubrey's eyes glazing over whenever he talked about retirement planning. Her irritation when he suggested they stick to their budget. The way she called him "my accountant" to her friends, with that little laugh that made him feel small. Marshall pulled into the parking lot of Dot's Diner, a place he and Aubrey had never been together. Inside, the vinyl booths were worn but clean, and the coffee was strong. He took a seat by the window, ordered a black coffee, and watched raindrops race down the glass. The waitress set down his mug. "Anything else, hon?" "Just this for now, thanks." When she walked away, Marshall pulled out his phone and scrolled to his sister's number. Lennox picked up on the second ring. "This better be good." "I'm billing at $400 an hour," she said, but there was warmth beneath her brisk tone. How fast can a man disappear without a trace, but still keep everything? Marshall asked quietly without a pause. "Marshall, what's happened?" "All business now. I just heard my wife discussing how to maximize alimony after she divorces me." Another pause. "Are you somewhere safe? Away from the house?" At Dot's Diner on Burnside. Stay there. I'm coming. The line went dead. Marshall sipped his coffee and watched the people walking by outside, hurrying through the rain. Normal people living normal lives. He wondered if they too carried secrets behind their everyday faces. 20 minutes later, Lennox pushed through the door, her dark hair damp from the rain. She spotted him immediately and slid into the booth across from him. Her sharp eyes assessed him. "You look calm," she said. "Too calm." "I feel calm." The waitress came over, and Lennox ordered coffee. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said once the waitress had gone. Marshall recounted the conversation he'd overheard, his voice even. When he finished, Lennox's jaw was tight. That manipulative little. She stopped herself. "Okay, let's think strategically. What do you want to do?" "I want to leave. Clean. No mess. No drama. But I don't want to lose everything I've worked for." Lennox nodded. "Remember those LLCs we set up last year? And the trust?" "Yes. This is why we did that. Not because I thought your marriage would fail, but because I've seen too many good people get taken advantage of." She leaned forward. "How much does she know about your finances?" "Almost nothing. She's never been interested beyond knowing we have enough." "Good. That's good." Lennox pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "Here's what we're going to do. You'll stay with me tonight. Tomorrow, we start moving assets. Quietly. What about Aubrey?" Lennox's pen paused. "What about her? What will she do when she realizes I'm gone?" "Probably panic. Then get angry. Then try to find you. By then, it'll be too late." Lennox studied her brother's face. "Can you handle that? This isn't going to be pretty." Marshall thought about the laughter he'd heard, so casual, so cutting. "I can handle it." "Then let's begin." Aubrey woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it blindly, eyes still closed, expecting to find Marshall's side of the bed empty. He always woke before her. When her fingers found his pillow instead of her phone, she groaned and forced her eyes open. The bedroom was bright with morning light. She squinted at the clock. 9:27 a.m. Marshall would have left for work hours ago. Her phone buzzed again. She found it on the nightstand and frowned at the screen. 17 missed calls and 47 text notifications. What the hell? Most of the calls were from Delaney, but there were also several from unknown numbers. She opened Delaney's texts first. "OMG, girl, call me. Right, Aubrey, seriously? What is happening? Your car got declined at lunch. I had to." Aubrey sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. She scrolled through more messages, several from her landlord, one from Netflix, two from the power company. She clicked on the landlord's message. "Mrs. Rayner, your automatic payment has failed. Please remit payment immediately to avoid late fees." "What the?" She jumped out of bed and grabbed her purse, pulling out her wallet. Her debit card was there, looking exactly as it always did. She grabbed her phone again and opened her banking app. The login failed. She tried again. Failed. Her heart began to race. She opened the Netflix app on her phone, only to be greeted with a message, "Profile deleted." "Marshall?" she called out, moving quickly to the door. "Marshall!" The house answered with silence. Aubrey ran to Marshall's office and flung open the door. Everything looked normal. His desk was tidy, his chair pushed in, but his laptop was gone. She pulled open his desk drawers. Empty. She ran to the closet in their bedroom. His clothes were still there, but when she checked the top shelf where he kept his important documents, the folder was missing. Panic rising in her throat, Aubrey dialed Marshall's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Marshall, what the hell is going on? My cards aren't working. The rent didn't go through. Call me back immediately." She hung up and tried again. Voicemail. Aubrey sank onto the bed, her mind racing. Had something happened to him? An accident? But no, this was too organized. Their accounts were locked. The Netflix profile deleted. This was deliberate. Her phone rang, and she snatched it up. "Marshall." "No, it's me," Delaney said. "What the hell is going on? My card was declined at lunch yesterday, and now everyone at work is getting these weird emails about the project budgets being frozen." "I don't know," Aubrey said, her voice shaking. "Marshall's gone. He's not answering his phone, and I can't access any of our accounts." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "I mean he's not here, and I think he's locked me out of everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You don't think he heard us yesterday, do you?" A cold weight settled in Aubrey's stomach. The Zoom call. The joke about alimony. She hadn't even thought to check if his office door was closed. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Aubrey, listen to me," Delaney said, her voice sharp with urgency. "You need to find him now. This is serious. If he's cutting you off financially, you need to get ahead of this." "How?" "I don't even know where he is." "His sister." "What's her name?" "The lawyer." "Lennox," Aubrey said, her lip curling. She'd always hated Marshall's older sister, with her judgmental eyes and cool assessment. "Call her. Go to her office if you have to." "I can't just." "You can and you will," Delaney cut in. "Look, I have connections at the bank. I can make some calls, see if we can get your accounts reopened. But you need to find Marshall before he does something crazy." Aubrey hung up and immediately dialed Lennox's office. The receptionist answered with a crisp, "Ward Family Law. How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with Lennox Ward immediately. It's her sister-in-law, Aubrey Rayner." "I'm sorry. Ms. Ward is unavailable at the moment. Would you like to leave a message?" "Tell her it's an emergency. My husband is missing." "I'll pass that along. Can I get your callback number?" Aubrey gave her number and hung up, frustration building. She tried Marshall again. Voicemail. She looked around their bedroom, feeling suddenly like a stranger in her own home. The framed photos of their wedding, the matching nightstands, the expensive sheets she'd insisted on. All of it felt like a stage set now, props in a play that had just taken an unexpected turn. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Lennox. Marshall is safe. He does not wish to speak with you at this time. Any further communication should go through me." Aubrey stared at the message, rage and disbelief warring inside her. How dare he? How dare he just disappear and cut her off without even a conversation? She typed back furiously, "Tell him to stop playing games and come home now. This is childish and cruel." The response came almost immediately. "What's cruel is discussing how to maximize alimony after divorce while your husband pays for everything. Marshall has made his decision. Respect it." Aubrey threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, but didn't break. She took a deep breath, trying to think. This wasn't over. Marshall might be 10 steps ahead right now, but she wasn't without resources. She had friends, connections, and she knew Marshall knew how to push his buttons, how to make him feel guilty that he would regret this. She would make sure of it. Marshall sat at Lennox's kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the polished wood. His sister's condo was the opposite of the home he'd shared with Aubrey, sleek, modern, and ruthlessly organized. Lennox set a stack of papers in front of him. "These are the ownership transfers for the properties. All we need is your signature." Marshall picked up the pen she offered and signed where indicated, his handwriting neat and precise. "How long will it take for the transfers to process?" "A few days." For Aubrey to realize what's happening? She probably already suspects. Marshall nodded. His phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications before he'd turn it off completely. He'd checked the messages once, a stream of confusion, anger, and finally, threats from Aubrey. "She's called my office 6 times, Lennox said, sorting the signed papers into folders. "And she showed up yesterday, demanding to see me." "What did you tell her?" "That you're my client now, and any communication needs to go through proper channels." Lennox poured herself more coffee. "You know she'll try to find you at work next. No one knows not to tell her anything." Marshall trusted his friend and co-worker implicitly. Noah had been the one who'd helped him clear out his desk over the weekend, when the office was empty. "Good." Lennox studied her brother's face. "How are you holding up?" Marshall considered the question. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. No one would be fine after what you heard." He shrugged. "I'm processing it." "Marshall." Lennox set down her coffee cup. "You always knew she'd sell you out. I saw it from the beginning. I just didn't think she'd laugh about it." The words came out more quietly than he'd intended. Lennox reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a rare gesture of affection from his usually stoic sister. "I know. I'm sorry." Marshall withdrew his hand and returned to the papers. "What's next?" "Next, we finish separating your finances. The LLCs we set up last year will protect the rental properties. The trust owns your shares in the tech startups. The only joint account was the checking account, which is now frozen. What about the house? It's in your name only. She never wanted to be on the mortgage because she said it would ruin her credit score. Marshall finished. She always had an excuse. Well, her excuses just cost her a claim to half your assets. Lennox gathered the folders. I've got a meeting with the bank this afternoon to make sure everything's secure. They've already flagged the accounts for potential fraud, so even if she tries to access them, she can't. Marshall nodded, his mind already moving to the next steps. I need to find a new place to live. There's no rush. You can stay here as long as you need. I know, but I need my own space. He needed to rebuild, to create something that was exclusively his. I'll have my real estate contact call you. Lennox checked her watch. I've got to get to court. Will you be okay here? Yes. I've got work to do anyway. The tech company had been understanding about his need to work remotely for a while. After Lennox left, Marshall opened his laptop and logged into his work account. There were several new messages from Noah checking in. He responded briefly, assuring his friend that he was okay and would be back in the office soon. Then he opened a new document and began to type. A list of everything he'd shared with Aubrey. Everything that needed to be reclaimed or replaced. It was a long list. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, assuming it was Aubrey using someone else's phone, but curiosity got the better of him. Hi, Marshall. This is Gwen from work. Noah gave me your new number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to check that you're all right. Things are weird here without you. Marshall hesitated, then replied, Thanks, Gwen. I'm fine. Just taking some personal time. The response came quickly. Good to hear. By the way, I used to intern at Cascade Marketing before joining your team. That's where Aubrey works, right? Small world. Marshall stared at the message, something clicking into place. Gwen, the quiet analyst who joined his team 6 months ago. He'd never made the connection that she might have worked with Aubrey. Very small, he typed back. We should talk when I'm back in the office. Looking forward to it, came the reply. Marshall set down his phone, feeling the first stirrings of something other than cold detachment. Not hope exactly, but perhaps a path forward that he hadn't seen before. The memory hit Marshall as he was unpacking his few belongings in Lennox's guest room. IT had been their 3rd anniversary. He'd made dinner reservations at Aubrey's favorite restaurant, an overpriced place downtown with tiny portions and exorbitant wine markups. But that morning, going through the mail, he'd found a credit card statement addressed to Aubrey. What's this? He'd asked, holding up the envelope. Aubrey had snatched it from his hand. Just a store card. For emergencies. We have emergency funds, he pointed out. And the limit on this is $15,000. God, Marshall, do you have to micromanage everything? She'd rolled her eyes. Some of us like having a little freedom. Freedom to do what? Rack up debt we can't pay off. There you go again with the budgeting lecture. You know what? Just forget it. Keep your spreadsheets and your savings account. Some of us actually want to live a little. The argument had escalated. Dinner was canceled. And the next day, Aubrey had come home with shopping bags from 3 different designer stores. My money, my choice, she'd said defiantly. Marshall had let it go. Because that's what he did. He accommodated, adjusted, made room for her chaotic approach to finances. He thought it was compromise. Now he saw it for what it was, surrender. There had been other signs, too. The way she'd mocked him when he refused to finance a luxury SUV they couldn't afford. God, Marshall, you're so boring. Live a little. The contempt in her voice when he'd suggested they save for a vacation instead of putting on credit. What's the point of having money if you never spend it? But the worst had been the night they'd had dinner with her friends, and she'd introduced him as my personal banker with that little laugh. The one that made everyone else laugh too, at his expense. Marshall zipped up his empty suitcase and slid it under the bed. He had brought very little from the house, just clothes, his laptop, and a few personal items that couldn't be replaced. Everything else he'd left behind. Let Aubrey have the furniture, the artwork she'd insisted on, the kitchen gadgets that were never used. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly weary. How had he not seen it? The calculation behind her smile, The way she measured everything in terms of what it could get her. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Noah's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," Marshall answered. "Hey yourself," Noah said. "You planning to come in tomorrow? The new data system is giving everyone fits. Not tomorrow. Maybe next week." "All right. Just checking." A pause. Gwen asked about you again today." Marshall sat up straighter. "What did she say?" "Just wondering when you'd be back. Said she had some information that might interest you." "About what?" "Wouldn't say. You know how she is all mysterious and quiet until she drops some knowledge bomb that changes everything." Noah chuckled. "Want me to tell her anything?" Marshall thought for a moment. "Tell her I'll meet her for coffee tomorrow. The place across from the office, around 10. "Will do." "And Marshall." "Yeah, whatever's going on with you and Aubrey. I'm here if you need to talk." "Thanks, Noah. I appreciate it." After hanging up, Marshall went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. The conversation with Noah had reminded him that there was still a world out there, his work, his friends, a life that existed apart from Aubrey and the wreckage of their relationship. He pulled out his laptop again and opened his email. There were several messages from Aubrey, with subject lines ranging from "please read this" to "you're making a huge mistake." He deleted them without opening them. There was also an email from his bank confirming that his new accounts were set up and ready to use. Lennox had been thorough, making sure he had access to funds while keeping everything secure from Aubrey's reach. Marshall closed his laptop and looked around Lennox's spare, elegant kitchen. This wasn't where he belonged, but neither was the house he'd shared with Aubrey. He needed to build something new, something that was entirely his own. Tomorrow, he would meet with Gwen, and maybe, just maybe, he would start to get some answers. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when Marshall arrived. He spotted Gwen immediately, sitting at a corner table, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was focused on her laptop, fingers typing rapidly, a half-empty cup of coffee beside her. Marshall ordered his usual black coffee, no sugar, and made his way to her table. She looked up as he approached, a small smile forming. "Marshall, good to see you." She closed her laptop. "I wasn't sure you'd come. Noah said you had information." He sat down across from her. "About Aubrey." Gwen nodded, her expression turning serious. "When I interned at Cascade Marketing, I worked directly under Delaney Cruz. Aubrey's friend. I know who Delaney is, right? Well, they weren't exactly professional." Gwen's voice lowered. "I used to hear them during coffee breaks, talking about their relationships, their spending habits, about men they were seeing." Marshall's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "Men? Plural?" Gwen looked uncomfortable. "I don't want to overstep. I just thought you should know, the things they were saying didn't sound like women in committed, honest relationships." "I appreciate your concern, Gwen, but Aubrey and I are separated now. What she did or didn't do doesn't matter anymore." Gwen studied him for a moment. "You don't believe that?" "Not really." She was right. Despite everything, part of him still wanted to know the full extent of Aubrey's betrayal. How deep the deception went. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked finally. "Mostly Delaney, talking about how to maximize returns on relationships. Aubrey was quieter, but she was always asking questions, like how to hide purchases from bank statements, how to set up separate accounts without raising suspicions." Gwen hesitated, and once I overheard them talking about someone named Theo. Aubrey said he'd been texting her again. The name hit Marshall like a physical blow. Theo McLean, Aubrey's ex-boyfriend from before they'd met. She described him as a mistake from my past, but had kept in touch with him sporadically through social media. "When was this?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "About 8 months ago, just before I left Cascade." Gwen looked genuinely regretful. "I'm sorry, Marshall. I should have said something sooner, but it wasn't my place." "No, it wasn't." He took a deep breath. "But I appreciate you telling me now." They sat in silence for a moment, the buzz of the coffee shop continuing around them. "There's something else," Gwen said finally. "The company backup server at Cascade, it archives all internal communications. Emails, chats, everything. As an intern, I had access because I was managing the data migration project." Marshall raised an eyebrow. And I might still have the login credentials." She met his gaze steadily. "If you want to know what they've been saying. Recently, the offer hung between them. Marshall knew it was probably illegal, definitely unethical. But then, so was plotting to trap a man into fatherhood for financial gain. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Gwen nodded and reopened her laptop. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Marshall met with Lennox's banker, who helped him set up new accounts under his name only. He called the utility companies for the house, transferring services to Aubrey's name or canceling them outright. He canceled the joint phone plan, the streaming subscriptions, the meal delivery service point one by one. He severed the threads that had bound his life to Aubrey's. Lennox called around noon. "How's it going?" "Almost done," Marshall said, checking off another item on his list. "Just the car insurance left." "The Mercedes is in your name," Lennox reminded him. "You can report it stolen if she doesn't return it. Let her keep it for now. It'll give her a false sense of security." Lennox chuckled. "You're colder than I am, little brother. And that's saying something." After hanging up, Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from Gwen. "If you're still interested, I have something to show you. Can you meet at the park near the office at 4? Marshall stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "I'll be there at T precisely 4 p.m. Marshall found Gwen sitting on a bench near the park's central fountain. She had a folder in her lap and was watching the pigeons peck at crumbs nearby. "You came," she said as he sat down beside her. "You said you had something to show me." Gwen handed him the folder. "I printed these. I thought it would be better than sending them electronically." Marshall opened the folder and found several pages of printed chat logs. The timestamp showed they were from the previous day. Between Aubrey and Delaney. "Aubrey, he's completely ghosted me. All accounts frozen, utilities in my name now, phones disconnected. Delaney, what about the car? Aubrey, still have it. Probably an oversight on his part. Delaney, or a trap. Be careful. Aubrey, I need to find him. Make him talk to me. Delaney, why bother? Just claim emotional distress, get a good lawyer, and take half his stuff. Aubrey, it's not that simple. He's always been weird about keeping things separate. I don't even know what he's worth. Delaney, time to play dirty then. You still ovulating?" Marshall's stomach clenched at the next exchange. "Aubrey, Delaney. I'm not going to trap him with a pregnancy. Delaney, why not? It's guaranteed income for 18 years. Aubrey, because I'd have to sleep with him first, and that's not happening. Delaney, desperate times, girl. But there's always plan B. Aubrey, what's plan B? Delaney, Theo, he's been asking about you on IG." Marshall closed the folder, unable to read anymore. "You didn't read the rest," Gwen said quietly. "I've seen enough." She agreed to meet Theo for drinks. "Tonight." Marshall nodded, a strange calm settling over him. "Thank you for showing me this. You didn't deserve what they did," Gwen said, her voice soft but firm. "What they're still doing. I hope this helps." Marshall really looked at her for perhaps the first time. She was younger than him, but there was a steadiness in her gaze that spoke of someone who had seen more than her years might suggest. "It does help," he said. "More than you know." Theo McLean's Instagram profile showed a man who thought too highly of himself. Filtered photos of expensive meals, nightclub outings, and gym selfies dominated his feed. His bio read, "Entrepreneur, visionary, living life on my terms." Marshall scrolled through the photos, trying to see what Aubrey might have been attracted to. The man was conventionally handsome in a generic way, gym-built body, carefully styled hair, white teeth flashing in every picture. But there was something hollow about him, a performative quality that felt desperate. "Stalking the competition?" Lennox asked, peering over his shoulder. Marshall closed the app. "Just trying to understand." "What's to understand? He's a sleazy pretty boy with no substance. Exactly Aubrey's type before you came along." Lennox sat down across from him at the kitchen table. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Marshall said. "If she wants to go back to him, that's her choice. You're just going to let her hook up with her ex. We're separated, Lennox. What she does doesn't concern me anymore." Lennox raised an eyebrow. "Then why were you looking him up?" Marshall didn't answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure. It wasn't jealousy that emotion seemed too simple for the complex tangle of feelings inside him. It was more like confirmation. Each new betrayal hardened his resolve, cementing his decision to cut Aubrey out of his life. His phone buzzed with a message from Gwen. They met at Riverside Lounge. Left together at 11:43 p.m. Marshall stared at the text. He hadn't asked Gwen to follow them. The fact that she had taken it upon herself to do so was both concerning and oddly touching. "You shouldn't have done that," he typed back. "I was meeting friends there anyway. Just happened to see them." Whether that was true or not, Marshall couldn't say. But he appreciated the information, even as part of him wished he didn't have it. "Thank you," he replied finally. Then, after a moment's thought, he added, "But please don't put yourself in uncomfortable situations on my account." "It's not worth it that I disagree," came her response. "Some things are worth it." Marshall set his phone down, unsure how to respond to that. "Good news?" Lennox asked, noticing his expression. "Not exactly." He filled her in on what Gwen had told him, including her surveillance of Aubrey and Theo. Lennox whistled. "This Gwen seems invested. She's just being helpful. Very helpful. And also possibly engaging in stalking and corporate espionage on your behalf." Marshall frowned. "When you put it that way, it sounds problematic." "It is problematic, but also potentially useful." Lennox's expression turned thoughtful. "Just be careful. Make sure she knows where the boundaries are." The next morning, Marshall woke early and went for a run, trying to clear his head. The city was quiet at 6 a.m., the streets still damp from overnight rain. He ran until his legs ached and his lungs burned, pushing himself harder than usual. When he returned to Lennox's condo, he found his sister already dressed for court, sipping coffee in the kitchen. "Mail came early," she said, nodding toward an envelope on the counter. "It's from her." Marshall picked up the envelope. His name was written on the front in Aubrey's flowing handwriting. No address, which meant she delivered it by hand. "You go to open it?" Lennox asked. Marshall turned the envelope over in his hands. Then, without a word, he tore it in half and dropped the pieces into the trash. "Good call," Lennox said, approval in her voice. Nothing she has to say matters now. But later, after Lennox had left for court, Marshall found himself retrieving the torn envelope from the trash. He pieced it together enough to extract the letter inside. "Marshall, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. What you heard on that Zoom call was inexcusable. Delaney and I were just joking around, but that's no excuse. I never meant any of it. You have to believe that. Please come home so we can talk about this like adults. I miss you. The house feels empty without you. Whatever you think I've done, we can work through it together. I love you. I've always loved you. Don't throw away everything we've built over one stupid mistake." That Aubrey Marshall read the letter twice, searching for sincerity and finding none. Just more manipulation, more lies. The Aubrey who wrote this letter was the same Aubrey who had laughed about divorcing him and collecting alimony. The same Aubrey who had met her ex-boyfriend for drinks less than a week after Marshall had left. He tore the letter into smaller pieces and threw them away again. This time, he didn't look back. His phone buzzed with a message from Gwen. "If you're free, I have more information." "Coffee?" Marshall hesitated, remembering Lennox's warnings. But the pull of knowing was too strong. "Same place as before." 30 minutes, he replied. When he arrived at the coffee shop, Gwen was already there, a folder on the table in front of her. She looked up as he approached, her expression serious. "Before you sit down," she said, "I want to make sure you actually want to see this. Because once you do, you can't unsee it." Marshall took the seat across from her. "What is it?" Gwen slid the folder toward him. "Text messages. Between Aubrey and Theo. Going back 6 months. Marshall's hand hovered over the folder. "How did you get these?" "The backup server archives everything sent or received on company devices. Aubrey uses her work phone for personal texts. That's an invasion of privacy." Gwen met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it is. And what she did to you was an invasion of trust. You didn't deserve that. I hope this helps." She stood up, gathering her things. "I'll give you some privacy. If you want to talk after, I'll be at the office until 6. After she left, Marshall sat staring at the closed folder for a long time. Did he really want to know? Would it change anything? Finally, he opened it. The first page was dated 3 months ago. "Theo, miss you, baby. Last night was Aubrey. You're terrible. I told you not to text me during work hours. Theo, can't help it. Keep thinking about what you were wearing. or not wearing. Aubrey, Marshall almost saw your message last week. Be more careful. Theo, dump the accountant already. You know you want to. Aubrey, it's complicated. Just be patient. Marshall flipped to the next page and the next. The exchanges continued, becoming more explicit, more detailed. Aubrey and Theo had been meeting regularly for months, always when Marshall was working late or out of town. The final page was from just last night. Theo, you coming over again tonight? Aubrey can't. Too much going on. Marshall's sister is threatening legal action. Theo, thought you said he wouldn't fight back. Aubrey, I was wrong. He's changed. Theo, his loss, my gain. Doors open when you're ready, baby. Marshall closed the folder, a strange sense of calm washing over him. The anger he'd expected didn't come. Instead, he felt only certainty, the absolute conviction that he'd made the right decision, that he stood up, leaving the folder on the table, and walked out of the coffee shop. Outside, the spring air was crisp and clean. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe properly. His phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Hey, the team's going for drinks after work. Join us. Marshall smiled slightly. Sure. What time? 6:30 at Murphy's. I'll be there. It was time to rejoin the world. His world. Without Aubrey. The knock came at 7:26 p.m., just as Marshall was finishing dinner with Lennox. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Lennox looked up from her plate. Expecting someone, Marshall shook his head. No. Another knock, louder this time. Lennox stood up. I'll handle it. No. Marshall said, rising from his chair. I think I know who it is. He moved to the front door and looked through the peephole. Aubrey stood on the other side, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She was wearing the green dress he'd bought her for her birthday last year. Marshall took a deep breath and opened the door. To Aubrey's expression shifted instantly from impatience to a practiced vulnerability. Marshall, she said, her voice soft and slightly tremulous. Finally, what do you want, Aubrey? She blinked, clearly taken aback by his direct tone. I want to talk. You've been ignoring my calls, my texts, my letter. There's nothing to talk about. Of course there is. Her voice rose slightly. You can't just walk out on our marriage without even a conversation. You're acting crazy. We were joking. You're ruining everything. Marshall looked at her, really looked at her. The careful way she'd arranged her features into an expression of hurt, the calculated vulnerability in her stance. Had she always been this transparent? No, he said quietly. You did that. I'm just finishing the paperwork. Aubrey's mask slipped, just for an instant, revealing anger beneath. This is about that stupid Zoom call, isn't it? God, Marshall, it was a joke. People say things they don't mean all the time. You've never made a joke about me. Not about exploiting you for money. No, that's not fair. You're taking it completely out of context. Marshall said nothing, just continued to look at her with the same steady gaze that Aubrey's strategy shifted. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, Marshall, I miss you. I love you. Whatever you think I've done, we can work through it. That's what marriage is about, working through the hard times. Is that what you were doing with Theo? Working through hard times. The color drained from Aubrey's face. What? Theo McLean. Your ex. The one you've been sleeping with for the past 6 months. That's not true. Who told you that? Her voice had lost its softness now, turning sharp with panic. You did. Every time you lied about working late. Every time you came home smelling like someone else's cologne and claimed it was from hugging a coworker. Every text you thought I wouldn't see. Aubrey's expression hardened. You've been spying on me. I didn't have to. You weren't exactly careful. This is insane. You're making accusations based on nothing. Stop lying, Aubrey. It's over. She took a step forward, desperation replacing the calculated vulnerability. It doesn't have to be. We can go to counseling. We can start fresh. Please, Marshall, don't throw away everything we've built. We didn't build anything, Marshall said, his voice calm but firm. I built it. You just lived in it. From the doorway behind him, Lennox's voice cut through the tension. I think it's time for you to leave, Aubrey. Aubrey's gaze shifted to Lennox, standing on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the confrontation with detached interest. Her lip curled in disgust. Of course you're behind this, she spat. You've always hated me. always poisoning him against me with your paranoid lawyer talk. Lennox took a sip of her coffee, unmoved. Funny how that paranoid lawyer talk saved my brother from financial ruin. Almost like I knew exactly what kind of person you are. Aubrey turned back to Marshall, her composure cracking further. Is that what this is about? Money? You think I'm after your precious bank accounts, aren't you? No. I love you. I've always loved you. Then why were you discussing alimony with Delaney? Why were you sleeping with Theo? Why did you hide purchases, lie about your spending, mock me to your friends? With each question, Marshall's voice remained steady, but his eyes never left hers. That Aubrey's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. For once, she seemed genuinely at a loss. That's what I thought, Marshall said. Goodbye, Aubrey. He began to close the door. Wait. Aubrey jammed her foot in the doorway. You can't just end things like this. We're married. You have obligations. Legal obligations. Marshall raised an eyebrow. Ask Lennox about those. What's that supposed to mean? Lennox smiled, a cold, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. It means my brother has excellent legal representation. I suggest you find the same. Marshall gently but firmly removed Aubrey's foot from a doorway. Don't come here again. Any communication can go through our lawyers. Our lawyers? Are you serious? Aubrey's voice rose in pitch. You're actually divorcing me? Over one stupid comment and some paranoid jealousy. Yes, Marshall said simply. I am. And with that, he closed the door, cutting off whatever response Aubrey might have made. He stood there for a moment, listening to the silence on the other side. Then came the sound of heels clicking angrily on the pavement, followed by a car, door slamming, and an engine starting. Lennox put a hand on his shoulder. You okay? Marshall nodded. For the first time since he'd heard Aubrey's words on that Zoom call, he felt something like peace. I'm okay, he said, and he meant it. The courtroom was cooler than Marshall had expected, the air conditioning running at full blast despite the mild spring weather outside. He sat at the defendant's table, Lennox beside him in her most imposing charcoal gray suit. Across the aisle, Aubrey sat with her attorney, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s named Patricia Dunham. Aubrey had chosen her outfit carefully, a modest navy blue dress that suggested respectability and wronged innocence. Marshall kept his expression neutral as Judge Rodriguez entered the courtroom. The preliminary hearing was a formality, but Lennox had insisted on being fully prepared. All rise, the bailiff called, and everyone stood as the judge took his seat. Be seated, Judge Rodriguez said, shuffling through the papers before him. We're here for preliminary matters in the case of Langston versus Rayner. I understand the petitioner is seeking emergency spousal support pending the outcome of divorce proceedings. Is that correct, Ms. Dunham? Aubrey's lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client has been cut off from all financial resources by the respondent. She has no access to joint accounts, credit cards, or even basic utilities. Mr. Rayner has effectively abandoned her without means of support. Lennox rose smoothly. Your Honor, if I may, there are no joint accounts to access. My client has maintained separate finances throughout the relationship, with Ms. Langston's full knowledge and consent. Ms. Langston claims otherwise, the judge noted, glancing at the papers. She states that as Mr. Rayner's wife, she is entitled to spousal support and equitable division of assets acquired during the marriage. The validity of the marriage itself is in question, Your Honor, Lennox replied, her voice calm and authoritative. We've submitted documentation showing that while a ceremony took place, the marriage certificate was never properly filed. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Aubrey's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock as she whispered urgently to her attorney. Judge Rodriguez frowned. Ms. Dunham, were you aware of this? Aubrey's lawyer looked flustered. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of such a claim. My client has been operating under the understanding that she is legally married to Mr. Rayner. It appears your client failed to complete the necessary paperwork, Lennox said, removing a document from her briefcase. This is a copy of the ceremony certificate, which was never filed with the county clerk's office. Ms. Langston insisted on handling the filing herself, claiming it was more romantic that way. Marshall watched Aubrey's face as the realization dawned on her. The marriage certificate, the one she'd taken from him after the ceremony, promising to file it herself. She'd said it was silly bureaucracy, that what mattered was their commitment to each other, not a piece of paper. He'd agreed, trusting her to handle IT. IT had been the perfect manipulation playing on his trust while ensuring she remained legally unencumbered. What she hadn't realized was that it worked both ways. "Is this true, Ms. Langston?" the judge asked, looking directly at Aubrey. Aubrey stood, her hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I thought it had been filed. I must have misplaced it, or—" "So you admit you took responsibility for filing the marriage certificate?" Judge Rodriguez's tone was neutral, but his gaze was sharp. "Yes, but, and in the 3 years since your ceremony, you never verified that the marriage was legally recorded." Aubrey's lip quivered. "I didn't think I needed to. We were living as husband and wife." Lennox stepped forward. "Your Honor, without a valid marriage, the petitioner's claims for spousal support are moot. Mr. Rayner has no legal obligation to support Ms. Langston." Judge Rodriguez tapped his pen against the desk, considering. "Ms. Dunham, do you have any evidence to contradict these claims?" Aubrey's lawyer looked flustered. "We would need time to investigate, Your Honor. This revelation comes as a complete surprise to my client." "I imagine it does," the judge said dryly. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm denying the emergency motion for spousal support at this time, pending verification of the marriage status. Ms. Dunham, you have 2 weeks to provide proof that a valid marriage exists. Ms. Ward, I expect full financial disclosure from your client within the same time frame, in case such proof is forthcoming." He banged his gavel. "We're adjourned until May 3rd at 9 a.m. As they filed out of the courtroom, Marshall caught Aubrey's gaze across the aisle. Her eyes were filled with fury and disbelief. She started toward him, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering urgently in her ear. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Lennox allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "That went even better than expected. Did you see her face?" Marshall nodded, feeling strangely hollow. The victory didn't bring the satisfaction he'd anticipated. "She really thought she had me. She thought she was smarter than you," Lennox corrected. "That was her mistake. She underestimated you right from the beginning." As they walked to the parking lot, Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," he replied. "I'll fill you in tomorrow." Another text came through, this one from Gwen. "Thinking of you today. Hope everything went well." Marshall paused, then typed, "It did. Thank you for everything." Her response was immediate. "You didn't deserve what she did to you. I'm just glad I could help that." "I in the car." Lennox glanced at his phone. "Your work friends checking in?" "Yes," Marshall said, putting the phone away. "They've been supportive. Especially Gwen, I bet," Lennox said with a knowing look. Marshall didn't reply, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something like anticipation for the future. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The email hit Cascade Marketing's HR department at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. It contained a recording of the Zoom call, the one where Aubrey and Delaney had laughed about Marshall paying the rent, about divorcing him for alimony, about trapping him with a pregnancy. That'd be why 10:30 a.m. Both women had been called into separate meetings with HR. By noon, Delaney had been escorted from the building, her personal items in a cardboard box. Aubrey lasted until 2 p.m., when she too was asked to leave, not terminated, but suspended pending investigation into violations of company ethics and conduct policies. The source of the leak remained anonymous, though rumors flew through the office. Some said it was an IT staff member who'd stumbled across the recording during routine server maintenance. Others whispered about a disgruntled former intern who'd had access to the backup systems. The truth was simpler and more elegant. Gwen had simply forwarded the recording, which she'd saved months ago, to herself, then sent it from a temporary email account to Cascade's HR director, ethics committee, and 3 board members. Marshall hadn't asked her to do it. In fact, he'd specifically told her not to take any further risks on his behalf. But Gwen had her own sense of justice, her own scores to settle with the women who had made her internship a nightmare of subtle humiliations and exclusion. When she told Marshall what she'd done, over coffee at their usual spot, his first reaction was concern. "They could trace it back to you," he said. "You could lose your job." Gwen shook her head. "I was careful. Besides, the company has a whistleblower protection policy. What they were doing violated multiple ethics standards. Still, it was a risk. Some things are worth the risk." She met his gaze steadily. "You didn't deserve what they did to you. I hope this helps." It was the same thing she'd said when she'd first shown him the chat logs. Marshall realized it was becoming something of a mantra for her, a statement of purpose that guided her actions. "You keep saying that," he said, "that I didn't deserve it. Why does it matter so much to you?" Gwen looked down at her coffee cup, turning it slowly between her hands. "When I was an intern at Cascade, Delaney was my supervisor. Aubrey was already established there. They used to mock the younger staff, especially the ones who weren't like them. Flashy, connected from the right backgrounds." She looked up again, her expression resolute. "I watched them destroy a talented designer's confidence to the point where she quit. I heard them laugh about manipulating men for money, status, connections. They treated people like tools or obstacles, nothing more. So when I realized you were Aubrey's husband, the one she talked about so dismissively, I knew exactly what was happening." Marshall absorbed this, seeing Gwen in a new light. Her quiet efficiency at work, her careful observations, her unwavering support, all of it stemmed from a deep sense of justice, a determination to right wrongs she had witnessed. "Thank you," he said finally. "Not just for what you did, but for telling me why." Gwen smiled, a real smile that transformed her serious face. "You're welcome. Now, are you ready for the project meeting at 3? Noah said the new system is giving him fits." Just like that, they shifted back to colleagues, professionals discussing work. But something had changed between them, a deeper understanding, a foundation for whatever might come next. Later that day, as Marshall was leaving the office, Noah fell in a step beside him in the parking lot. "So, Gwen," Noah said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "She's been helpful." Marshall shot him a look. "She has. And the fact that she took down your ex-wife's career is just a bonus, right? Aubrey's not technically my ex-wife. And Gwen didn't." "Oh, please." Noah rolled his eyes. The anonymous email that just happened to contain a recording that only someone with access to Cascade's backup server could have. The same day after you mentioned in passing that you wished there was a way to hold them accountable. "Come on." Marshall stopped walking. "Did she tell you?" "She didn't have to. I've known Gwen since she started here. She doesn't do anything halfway." Noah's expression softened. "Look, I'm not judging. What happened to you is messed up. I'm just saying, be careful. Gwen's intense. In a good way, but still." "I know." Marshall resumed walking. "And I'm being careful. For both our sakes." Noah clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Because I'd hate to see either of you get hurt. You've both been through enough." As Marshall drove home to Lennox's condo, which still didn't feel like home, he thought about Noah's words. About Gwen's intensity. About his own cautious approach to relationships. He wasn't ready for anything beyond friendship. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But for the first time since discovering Aubrey's betrayal, he felt open to the possibility that there might be something more in his future. Not with Gwen, necessarily, but with someone who valued honesty, integrity, and genuine connection. His phone rang as he pulled into the parking garage. "Lennox, have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "What news?" "Your wife's sorry. Not wife and her friend have been suspended from their jobs. Something about an ethics violation involving recorded conversations." Marshall kept his voice neutral. "I hadn't heard." Lennox's tone suggested she didn't believe him. "Well, it couldn't have happened to nicer people. By the way, Aubrey's lawyer called. They want to settle." "Settle what?" "There's nothing to settle." "Exactly. But they're still trying to claim common law marriage or some such nonsense. I told them we'd see them in court." Marshall smiled slightly. "You enjoyed that, didn't you?" "Every second," Lennox admitted. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up." After hanging up, Marshall sat in his car for a moment, thinking about justice. About consequences. About the careful balance between retribution and moving forward. Then he started the car again and headed out. He had an apartment to look at, a place of his own, where he could begin to rebuild, The courthouse was more crowded for the second hearing. Word had gotten out about the unusual case, the husband who claimed he was never legally married, the wife fighting for marriage rights she'd allegedly forfeited through her own negligence. Marshall sat at the same table as before, Lennox beside him with a thicker portfolio of documents than last time. Across the aisle, Aubrey looked significantly less polished than at the previous hearing. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal. Her navy suit hung loosely on her frame, suggesting she'd lost weight in the weeks since their confrontation. Her attorney, Ms. Dunham, looked grim as she conferred with Aubrey in hushed tones. Whatever they'd found or failed to find during their investigation had clearly not boosted their confidence. Judge Rodriguez entered, and the court went through the usual formalities. "This is a continuation of Langston versus Rayner," the judge began. "At our last hearing, I instructed Ms. Dunham to provide proof of a valid marriage between the petitioner and respondent. Ms. Dunham, what have you found?" Aubrey's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have conducted an exhaustive search of county records. While we have not located the file marriage certificate, we believe Ms. Langston and Mr. Rayner qualify as common law spouses under Oregon's recognition of common law marriages from other states." Lennox was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, Oregon does not recognize common law marriage, as counsel well knows. But it does recognize common law marriages established in other states," Ms. Dunham countered. "My client and Mr. Rayner vacationed in Colorado 4 years ago, where they represented themselves as husband and wife. Colorado recognizes common law marriage." Judge Rodriguez looked skeptical. "A vacation does not establish domicile, Ms. Dunham. Do you have evidence that your client and Mr. Rayner intended to establish residency in Colorado?" "No, Your Honor, but then the common law marriage claim is without merit." The judge turned to Lennox. "Ms. Ward, you indicated you had additional documentation to submit." "Yes, Your Honor." Lennox approached the bench with a file. "With the court's permission, I'd like to introduce these documents into evidence." As the judge reviewed the papers, Aubrey leaned forward in her seat, straining to see what Lennox had submitted. Marshall kept his gaze fixed ahead, his expression neutral. "Ms. Dunham, Ms. Langston," Judge Rodriguez said finally, "are you aware that your client never legally changed her name to Rayner?" Aubrey's mouth fell open. "What? Of course I did. I've been using that name for years." "Using a name and legally changing it are two different things," the judge explained. "According to these records, no petition for name change was ever filed with the court. Your driver's license, social security card, and passport are all still in the name of Aubrey Langston." That's not possible," Aubrey stammered. "I changed all my accounts, my email, everything. Informally, perhaps," Lennox interjected, "but not legally." Aubrey turned to her lawyer, panic in her eyes. "What does this mean?" Ms. Dunham looked equally confused. "Your Honor, even if Ms. Langston did not legally change her name, that doesn't invalidate a marriage." "No, it doesn't," Judge Rodriguez agreed. "But it does support Mr. Rayner's contention that no legal marriage exists. Ms. Langston has been operating under assumptions rather than legal facts." He shuffled the papers again. "Moreover, I have here a sworn statement from the officiant at the ceremony, confirming that he provided the marriage certificate to Ms. Langston at her specific request, and that she assured him she would file it herself." Aubrey's face had gone completely white. I must have forgotten. With the honeymoon and moving in together, it just slipped my mind. For 3 years. The judge's skepticism was palpable. "Your Honor," Lennox said, "my client entered into the relationship in good faith, believing Ms. Langston had handled the legal formalities as she promised. It was only when reviewing his legal status in preparation for separation that he discovered the oversight." Judge Rodriguez nodded, considering. "Based on the evidence before me, I am forced to conclude that no legal marriage exists between Aubrey Langston and Marshall Rayner. Without a marriage, there can be no divorce, no spousal support, and no division of marital assets." He banged his gavel. "The petition is dismissed. Ms. Langston, if you wish to pursue claims for jointly owned property, you may file a separate civil action, but cannot proceed under family law jurisdiction." Aubrey sat frozen, staring at the judge in disbelief. Beside her, Ms. Dunham was hastily making notes, but her expression suggested she saw little hope for further legal action. As the court adjourned, Marshall stood and buttoned his jacket. He felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound sense of finality. It was over, truly over. Lennox gathered her papers, a small smile of professional satisfaction on her face. "Clean win," she murmured. "No appeals, no complications." They were headed for the door when Aubrey's voice stopped them. "Marshall." He turned to find her standing in the aisle, alone. Ms. Dunham had already left, apparently seeing no reason to witness the aftermath. "You planned this," Aubrey said, her voice hollow. "All of it. You knew I never filed the certificate. You knew I never legally changed my name. You were just waiting." "No," Marshall said quietly. "I trusted you. I assumed you'd done what you promised to do. It was only when I needed to protect myself that I discovered the truth. And you're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me lose everything." "You haven't lost everything, Aubrey. Just the things you never really earned." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I gave you 3 years of my life, and I gave you a home, financial security, loyalty, and trust." Marshall's voice remained calm. "One of us kept their end of the bargain." Aubrey's anger crumbled, replaced by something more desperate. "What am I supposed to do now? My job, my reputation, my home, it's all gone." For a moment, Marshall felt a flicker of the compassion he'd once had for her. But then he remembered the laughter on the Zoom call, the casual cruelty, the years of manipulation and lies. "You'll do what you've always done," he said. "Find someone else to use." He turned and walked away, Lennox by his side. He didn't look back. The house near MT Tabor Park was nothing like the one Marshall had shared with Aubrey. Where that home had been sleek and modern, all clean lines and open spaces, this one was a craftsman bungalow with character and history. Built in the 1920s, it had hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a wraparound porch that offered views of the park's lush greenery. Marshall stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and felt a sense of rightness he hadn't experienced in years. This place was his bought with his money, in his name, reflecting his taste rather than someone else's idea of what their home should be. "It's perfect," Noah said, walking in with a box labeled kitchen. "Totally you." Marshall nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "That's the idea." The past month had been a whirlwind of activity. After the court dismissed Aubrey's petition, Marshall had thrown himself into rebuilding his life. He'd found this house, negotiated a fair price, and closed in record time. He'd moved out of Lennox's condo with her blessing and her admission that she was ready to have her space back to herself. He'd returned to the office full-time, diving into new projects with renewed energy. His colleagues had welcomed him back without prying questions, respecting his privacy while offering quiet support. And now, on a sunny Saturday in June, his friends were helping him move into his new home. Gwen appeared in the doorway, carrying a potted plant. "Where do you want this? On the porch, maybe? Or by the bay window?" Marshall gestured vaguely, suddenly aware that he had no idea how to decorate a home that was entirely his own. Gwen smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Let's try a few spots and see what looks right." As she moved around the room, testing different locations for the plant, Marshall watched her with a mixture of gratitude and something else he wasn't quite ready to name. Their relationship had evolved over the past weeks into a comfortable friendship. They had coffee regularly, sometimes worked late together, occasionally joined Noah and other colleagues for drinks after work. Nothing more had developed, and neither of them had pushed for it. Both understood that Marshall needed time to heal, to rediscover himself outside of the relationship that had defined him for so long. "This looks good," Gwen said, placing the plant in the corner by the window. "It'll get plenty of light here." "Thanks," Marshall said. "Not just for the plant. For everything." Gwen met his gaze, her smile warm but not expectant. "You're welcome. I'm just glad to see you doing well." From the kitchen came the sound of Noah rummaging through boxes. "Marshall, what do you want these glasses? And please tell me you're going to buy a decent coffee maker. That old thing from your office is an embarrassment." Marshall laughed a genuine laugh that surprised him with its ease. "Top cabinet by the sink. And yes, I'll buy a new coffee maker. Maybe even one of those fancy espresso machines. Now you're talking. Noah emerged from the kitchen with a grin. See, Gwen, I'm a good influence. Debatable, she replied, but she was smiling too. The doorbell rang, and Marshall went to answer it. Lennox stood on the porch, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a small wrap package in the other. Housewarming, she said, handing him both. The champagne is for tonight. The gift is for later, when you're alone. Marshall accepted them with a nod. Thanks for coming. I know you're busy. Not too busy for this. Lennox looked past him into the house. It suits you. Much better than that sterile box you were in before. That was Aubrey's choice, Marshall reminded her. Exactly my point. Lennox stepped inside, taking in the warm wood tones and natural light. This is yours. It shows. The afternoon passed in a blur of unpacking, arranging, and occasional breaks for food and drinks. By evening, the house was taking shape, not finished, but beginning to feel lived in. Personal. As the sun set, the four of them sat on the porch with glasses of Lennox's champagne, looking out at the park where joggers and dog walkers were enjoying the last of the daylight. To new beginnings, Noah proposed, raising his glass. To freedom, Lennox added. To being true to yourself, Gwen said softly. Marshall looked at the three people who had stood by him through the darkest period of his life, who had offered support without judgment, help without expectation, friendship without conditions. To building new bridges, he said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. On the ashes of the old, they clinked glasses, and Marshall felt something settle inside him, not happiness exactly, but contentment. Peace, the knowledge that whatever came next, he would face it on his own terms. Later, after everyone had gone, Marshall sat on the porch alone, listening to the night sounds of his new neighborhood. He remembered Lennox's gift and went inside to retrieve it from the coffee table. The package was small and flat. He unwrapped it carefully to find a framed quote, elegantly lettered on heavy paper. The greatest freedom is to be who you truly are. Below it, Lennox had written in her precise handwriting, "You always were. Now you know it." Marshall hung the frame on the wall of his new living room, where the morning sun would catch it first thing each day. A reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd gained, and what he'd never compromise again. Aubrey Langston's apartment in Spokane was everything her home in Portland had not been: small, utilitarian, sparsely furnished. The gray November light filtering through the cheap blinds did nothing to brighten the beige walls or worn carpet. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. The screen showed no new texts, no missed calls, no notifications. Just like yesterday, and the day before, and the week before that. After the court had dismissed her petition, Aubrey's life had unraveled with shocking speed. Her suspension from Cascade Marketing had turned into termination when additional complaints about her workplace behavior had surfaced. Delaney, already fired, had been no help. She'd moved to Seattle and cut all contact, apparently blaming Aubrey for her downfall. The house in Portland had gone on the market. She'd had no claim to it, no legal right to stay. Marshall had given her 30 days to find a new place, which was more generosity than the law required. Theo had disappeared too, once it became clear that Aubrey had no access to Marshall's money. His last text had been brutally honest. "Don't call me again. Not interested in baggage." With nowhere else to go, she'd taken a job at a small advertising firm in Spokane, a significant step down in both pay and prestige. The apartment came furnished, which was fortunate since she couldn't afford to buy furniture. Aubrey scrolled aimlessly through her social media feeds, pausing at photos of former friends enjoying lives she no longer had access to. Portland brunches, work events, shopping trips, all continuing without her. An ad appeared in her feed. New Financial Literacy Podcast, hosted by Marshall Rayner. The photo showed Marshall looking confident and at ease with a simple tagline, "Building wealth through integrity." Aubrey closed the app quickly, but the image lingered in her mind. He looked good, better than when they were together. Happier, more himself. She set the phone down and went to the window, looking out at the unfamiliar street below. A few people hurried along the sidewalk, bundled against the cold, heading home to families, to partners, to lives filled with connection. Aubrey turned away from the window. Her apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. No one knew where she was. No one was coming to visit. No one was calling to check on her. For the first time in her life, Aubrey Langston was truly alone, and in the quiet of that solitude, in the stark clarity of its emptiness, she finally recognized the true cost of her choices.